All right. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in the Atlassian community event here for Vancouver, September 2021. I know everybody's probably looking forward to a day that we can meet in person, but we'll carry on with these virtual events for as long as we must there. But that does allow us to grab some speakers from afar, so it has a side benefit, as we've got Karen Fishwick from Highway 3 Solutions coming to us all the way from Victoria, and a little further afield, Joanne Yeo from Atlassian joining us from Toronto. So we'll get to their material momentarily, but we just wanted to kick off with just a quick blurb on the Confluence Security Advisory. I'm sure most of you are probably aware of this, but in case you are not, in sort of late August, Atlassian discovered or made mention of an issue with Confluence. You can go to atlassian.com/security for more details, but it seems like it's a fairly severe issue. So they do recommend upgrading as soon as possible to any of these supported versions. If you're unable to upgrade right away, there is a mitigation strategy or good mitigation script that's available. I recommend, again, this is recommended that you run on your instance, as soon as possible. And this affects all instances of the server and data center variety. Cloud is I guess, exempt from this, or they've already addressed it. And if for whatever reason you have a server Confluence instance and didn't receive notification on this, just go to your my.atlassian.com/email settings and make sure you update your communication preferences. So highly recommend you get that addressed as soon as possible there. So, all right.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we'll hand it over to Karen.
All right. Okay. Let me. All right, so today we're going to talk about, as usual, Jira in the cloud, the migration journey, and updated tips and tricks for each phase. As Brendan mentioned, Joanne is here to talk a little bit about latest news from Atlassian, and then I'll continue with the rest of the presentation and some questions and answers. So a little bit about Highway 3 Solutions. We were founded in 2001, and the company is actually named after the Crow's Nest Pass highway that runs through my hometown of Castlegar in the Kootenays, if anyone is familiar with that area of BC. We focus primarily on custom development of enterprise solutions for the BC government and some private sector organizations. We moved into the Atlassian space in 2018, and we became a gold solution partner 1 year later. And we were recognized with the Rising Star Award from Atlassian in 2020. So here's the agenda. First, over to Joanne for moving to a cloud future.
All right, thanks, Karen. Well, good afternoon, everyone over in Vancouver. I am Joanne Yeo, the Canadian lead for Atlassian based here in Toronto, as Brendan mentioned. I am just going to give you a really quick update on our journey to the cloud and a little bit of an update on data residency, and I'll touch on the Gartner Magic Quadrant for ITSM as well later on. So, as you know, it really is Atlassian's promise to deliver the best experience through our cloud offering for our customers. Even with the whole Confluence vulnerability issue, if our cloud customers weren't affected because we were able to send the patch through to all of our cloud customers, seamlessly. So there wasn't anything for our customers to do. And so that's just kind of like echoes our commitment to the cloud. And so, most customers see a path to Atlassian Cloud as their long-term plan for a number of reasons. SaaS technology eliminates the need for upgrades, just like this particular instance. Maintenance and other hidden ownership costs, freeing up your administrative time and resources internally. And of course, Atlassian Cloud comes with enterprise-grade security and data protection out of the box. And with cloud, you unlock, the lion's share of Atlassian's investment in innovation. Our platform leverages data from across our products to connect your tools, unify your teams, and enable information to flow easily across your organization for smarter and better collaboration across your company. Next slide, Karen. Oh.
Sorry, I was one ahead.
Sorry, the 80% slide, please. So Atlassian, if you can just go back. Thank you. Atlassian is not alone in our belief that the cloud is how we deliver innovation to an organization. According to Gartner, 80% of enterprise workloads will shift to the cloud by 2025, with more teams adopting modern frameworks and expecting a more seamless experience as time goes on. So what's in the works? If you probably already know about our cloud roadmap that is publicly available on our website. If you want more visibility into what else is coming to Atlassian Cloud, our cloud roadmap is available on our website. And as Karen has shown, it is atlassian.com/roadmap/cloud. And there you can find updates on security, data management, compliance, any of the features and functions around our cloud offering. And all of the updates are posted there on a quarterly basis. So we do update it quite regularly. Our product teams are updating that constantly. So yeah, if you go there, you will see under data management, that Canadian data residency is something that is coming up. And we are working feverishly to meet the deadline. Right now it says Q2, Q3 calendar of 2022. So it could be anywhere between April and June. We're hoping, April and September, my bad, Q2, Q3. So April, May, June quarter, or it could be the July, August, September quarter. So there are a lot of moving parts to getting this going for Canada. I know we've been saying this for a while, and I think the timeline got pushed out a couple of times now, but please keep in mind that this date is still subject to change, because it is dependent on so many variables outside of my immediate control. I wish it was something that I could just, turn on for all of our Canadian customers, but it is something that I am advocating for internally, every day. So please keep an eye on the roadmap as we do update it regularly. If there are any delays, we will publish that on the roadmap. And I will also let our partner network know so that they can keep you posted as well. So fingers crossed, and hoping for data residency very soon. In the meantime, please work with our partners to be ready for the cloud once data residency is available, because for some of our customers that could be a lengthy process depending on the amount of data that you're having to migrate, or if you're on an on-prem instance, just the whole process of migration can take longer than expected. So I encourage you to work with our partner community, partners like our valued partners like Highway 3, to really get that process going for you. Next slide is super excited. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but we are actually, Atlassian has been named a visionary in the 2021 Gartner Magic Quadrant for IT service management tools. I think this is the first time we've been on this quadrant, so we're super excited about it. And we're the only one in the visionary category. So yeah, in the report, Gartner, I'll sum it up for you real quick, but you can download the report on our website. There is a link to the report. Gartner applauded Jira Service Management for One, focusing on the convergence of digital experiences for development, operational, and business teams. And so really bringing those three teams together and having them talk to each other, right? Instead of being siloed. Number two, for Agile ITSM. So Gartner recognized that we really had a differentiated approach to ITSM that centers around DevOps and Agile support. Number three, for our transparent pricing model. So we're the only ones that offer free licensing tier for 3 or fewer agents and make it easy for prospective customers to test the product and budget before purchase with our transparent pricing model. And finally, for our customer growth. So Jira Service Management is the fastest growing product by new customer count in 2020 amongst the vendors within this evaluation. So that is a huge, this is a huge milestone for Atlassian as the Gartner Magic Quadrant is one of the industry's most cited and referred to reports. And customers use the Magic Quadrant to shortlist vendors all the time. Customers like yourselves. Atlassian's presence on the Magic Quadrant confirms industry validation. So we're super excited to be on it. And it really de-risks Atlassian as a viable service management solution. So really brings our Jira Service Management solution, it kind of kicked it up a notch. So if you have any questions around JSM, please contact your local Atlassian solution partner like Highway 3. And there are a number of resources that we can share with you if you're interested. So feel free to reach out to either Brendan or Karen or myself, and we'll be happy to share some links around the announcement. So look for some exciting marketing coming out of our partner network as well. So that is it for me. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Joanne.
All right.
So, all right. So now we're going to start with a bit of an overview of the migration journey. So everyone is probably pretty familiar with these timelines by now, but I'll just give an update. So coming up in February 2022 is the end of upgrades and downgrades. So you can no longer change the tiers of your server products. And then the next major deadline is February 2023, when you can no longer purchase new apps. And of course, February 2024 with the end of support and bug fixes. So again, kind of reiterating that Confluent server bug, this is a pretty important deadline for everyone. So Atlassian has really helped out both the partner community and the user community with defining a 6-phase plan for the cloud journey. I've described the phases here, and one of the big questions you probably have is how long does the trip take? So it really depends on the complexity of your instance, as well as if you're going to engage external support for the migration. So there's a lot of information on this slide, and there's a lot of kind of complexity assessment tools out there that will help you figure out how long your migration will take and what's the best approach. The two major factors that influence your complexity are the number of products you have, like Bitbucket, Confluence, and Jira Service Management, and the number of apps you have. The number of custom fields is mentioned here because I think it kind of indicates a level of customization that you might have implemented. But what we found really, it's the number of products and the number of apps that change your migration from 1 month to 18 months. So Atlassian provides support through tooling that's installed on your server products, such as the JCMA, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant, and the Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant, as well as the Cloud Migration Manager and some support engineers. The Cloud Migration Center, which the URL is down there at the bottom, atlassian.com/migration/cloud, is an excellent hub for a lot of the information we're presenting today. So Atlassian partners, such as Highway 3, can provide full support for the migration from planning to implementation, licensing recommendations, and post-migration training. And the online community is also very active with regards to support for migrations, including a lot of webinars, community forums, and events hosted by organizations such as the Vancouver Atlassian Community Group. Okay, so I've grouped the 6 phases into 3 sections. So we'll move into the first phase, which is assess and plan. So this phase will move you through determining if cloud is right for you through to planning of the migration. So as part of the assess phase, you want to ensure you understand your product landscape, which products you have at which tiers. You might have multiple instances of different server products. You want to know who's using them and if there are security implications of hosting that data in the cloud. This is a point at which you may have to complete a privacy impact assessment and a security threat risk assessment might be required for both the products and the apps you want to migrate. Choosing a cloud plan is something new for server customers. You'll likely be looking at standard, premium, and enterprise, or a mix of all three. Not all products are available on all of the plans. So if you use an SSO product, a single sign-on product like Okta, you'll also likely be needing Atlassian Access. So it's really worth kind of looking at the total cost of cloud licenses for your products so that you can see which version is right for you. Increasingly, Atlassian is bundling features and apps with premium and enterprise, and these apps previously came with a separate cost. So that's also something to look at. Next up, app assessment. This, of course, is one of the biggest challenges of the migrations. It needs to be done early and for both Jira and Confluence. So we'll talk a lot more about that. And finally, the migration strategy and migration method. So you need to determine which products you need to migrate before choosing this strategy, as your app migration may prohibit the use of things like the JCMA, for example, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. So for compliance and security, Atlassian is constantly adding certifications in this area. And the website down there at the bottom, atlassian.com/trust, is a great location to provide information that you would probably want to include in your PIA and STRA if you have to do security assessments. It's also worthwhile, as Joanne mentioned, to consult the roadmap to understand upcoming changes to the cloud ecosystem, including, of course, data residency changes and any other certifications that might be coming up. So this is a lot of detail on this slide. This is that information on the cloud plans and the main features they offer. So again, increasingly we find customers opting for premium, especially for Jira Service Management, in order to get the full ITSM capabilities provided with Insight and soon Proforma for Smartforms. For enterprise customers who may be migrating multiple on-prem instances, the unlimited cloud instances model can provide some cost savings, as well as the fact that Atlassian Access is included at no extra cost. Advanced Roadmaps was previously a plugin called Portfolio for Jira, and it helps multiple teams collaborate together, track the big picture, identify dependencies across large pieces of work, and plan for team capacity. It can be worthwhile to consult a partner to evaluate your license needs because they are a little bit more complicated than server, and it might be a combination of plans that will work best for you. So as I mentioned, if you used Crowd or an external directory for your authentication on Jira Server, then you probably need Atlassian Access. So with this tool with this product, you get automatic user provisioning via Okta, Azure AD, Google One Login, and custom SCIMs if you have that. So for migration methods, there's two main ways you can migrate. So the JCMA, as we talk about a lot, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant, and you'll probably use this tool whether you actually use it to migrate or not. I'll talk about that next. And Confluence has a corresponding app called the CCMA. The JCMA is best for the phased approach, which we'll talk about a little later, but it doesn't include everything on your site, and it's really important to understand what it doesn't include. For example, at the moment, you can't migrate Jira Service Management projects using this method, although that feature is currently in development. Full site export import generally supports more app migrations at the moment, but again, that is also changing as more apps support a JCMA migration path. The migration method is a critical decision, but you really need to assess your apps and determine your migration strategy before making this choice. So this screenshot is actually the JCMA output. So the JCMA and the CCMA provide an app assessment consolidated view. Because of the architectural differences between Atlassian Server and Cloud, apps have had to really be redesigned for the cloud environment. Atlassian has made huge investments in these tools, the JCMA and CCMA, to help assess your apps. So the JCMA will tell you two things, two main things. One is if your server plugin even has a corresponding cloud version, so it's kind of a non-starter if it doesn't exist. And two, if there's a known path to migrate the plugin data. You still have to dive into the details to see how that migration will work. The Confluence version of the tool also provides information on how many pages are actually using the plugin, which is really useful because a lot of people have plugins that maybe were requested some time ago, but aren't actively being used. So there's a ton of website materials and webinars out there, including Highway 3 is actually presenting a webinar at the end of September focused on the top 10 plugin migrations. And the JCMA support is constantly evolving, so things might change between when you do your preliminary assessment and when you're ready to do your migration. So migration path, again, for apps often dictates which migration method you can use from the previous slide. Okay, so now for the plan. If you haven't done so already, you should raise a move ticket. So this is a special kind of support ticket with Atlassian that will live throughout your migration. It assigns an Atlassian Cloud Migration Manager to your case, and the CMM provides guidance for your migration, including reviewing your migration runbook and potentially identifying any issues. The completed app assessment will include app migration pathways and map out the data migration details for each app that will be migrated. For apps that will not be migrated, you'll need to identify a replacement or another way of doing the process in the cloud. So we've talked a little bit about the migration methods that are available, and next we're going to talk about the migration strategy. So there are 4 strategies that outline the migration approach. Most organizations will combine some level of optimization with whichever strategy they implement other than start fresh. So optimize and shift, which is also known as replatforming, is the recommended approach for most customers. And you can kind of think of it as a chance to spring clean your systems, take what you need and leave behind what you don't. Using the optimize and shift strategy, you can also choose between the 2 migration methods that are available, the JCMA and the full site. So the details of your plan will be refined as you go through your prep and test phase, which is the next section, but the outline should be completed at this point in the journey. So some key things to think about are the planned activities, both internal and external activities that might be needed during the migration, including potentially some manual steps pre and post migration. Estimated timing will be determined mostly during your test phase, but you should have some idea of when you plan to complete the remaining phases of the migration at this point. So you have to assemble your team, could include internal and external resources. If you have a partner assisting, ensure their availability because they're getting busy doing a lot of cloud migrations. The internal team would include people like Jira administrators, system administrators. Don't forget your identity providers and testing resources. So for dependencies, just ensure you're familiar with your organizational privacy and security requirements so there are no surprises there. And check on integrations like CI/CD tools or related systems. People have hooked in a lot of their internal systems directly to Jira on-prem, and you need to identify all of those integrations in order to accommodate the change for the cloud. So in our experience for this phase, so a partner typically has quite a bit of experience and can help you navigate, but it's important to engage them early. So the move ticket gives you a cloud migration manager who can help with your project timelines, organize technical resources, and triage cloud issues. So both of those tools, if you're going to use a partner or the move ticket, do those very early in the migration journey. And then because of the difference in architecture from server and cloud, the app vendor may host their application and data outside of your Jira cloud environment. So even if you have data residency for your cloud environment, for your Jira instance, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean you have data residency for your app data. So you might need separate privacy impact or security assessments for your apps.
Karen, so for that move ticket too, though, just going back to that,
Yeah.
you can raise the ticket on behalf of the customer as well, right?
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be the customer raising it yourself, but the partner can do all of that for you and work with Atlassian to on the migration together. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically, if we're involved in kind of a full service mode for a migration, we will do most of these. We will lead most of these activities. Absolutely. Thank you. So timelines. So be realistic, add some time for the unknowns. Timelines can range from 1 month to 18 months and depend not only on your migration complexity, but the availability of internal and external resources and the capacity for downtime potentially to your environment. So for a high availability, Jira server environment with many teams, you just be realistic about the availability of the resources to test. And finally, don't underestimate this optimized step in cloud, and not only to simplify your migration, but once you're in cloud, you don't have access to a database. So everything you do within your cloud infrastructure has to be done through the interface and what's available to you there, or through APIs or plugins that provide additional kind of bulk update capabilities. So reducing the size and complexity of your data at this point can really simplify your migration. Okay, so now prep and test. So with your final preparations, the focus shifts from assessment and identifying requirements into preparing a detailed migration plan and communicating your migration plan to stakeholders and users. So you'll take steps to make sure your existing data is prepared for a smooth migration. This is kind of part of Optimize, but it's also part of just making sure the data is valid for the cloud, and you'll get your new environment ready. So specifically, during the final preparations, you would have instantiated a cloud site for your tests as well as your production site if you're going to use different environments. You would confirm your migration timings with your CMM and any support partners that need to be involved. This is a really important step because you very likely will need to schedule activities from your support partners by your app support vendors is what I mean there. You need to identify a user migration strategy. So this is how your users and groups will get to the cloud. Make sure that their anonymous access is handled if you're going to enable it or not. Excuse me. And ensure your new cloud site has the correct user tier and access is configured with user provisioning. So you'll work through any of your optimization strategies that you identified in planning. So the preparation phase includes potentially archiving projects, cleaning up data, and you'll identify an internal communication strategy. So how you're going to communicate the different phases of the testing and the production migrations, and you'll prepare training materials to support your users and administrators for the changes they can expect to see. So now is a really good time, if you haven't already, to have a project manager who will lead and organize the activities for the next few phases. I can't overestimate enough that this is a project that you have to treat as an actual project and work through it with the same structure you would any kind of major software project. So practice. So this is kind of testing. So the practice phase will help you refine your migration runbook. So these are all the steps that you have to take during the actual migration, and just make sure to document everything. With each test, you might need to reset your cloud environment, and you have to keep in mind that you might need to engage Atlassian or vendor support in order to reset the data. So for example, if you have the Tempo plugin and you test a migration, you actually have to raise a ticket with Tempo in order to reset that cloud environment in order to do another test. So even in the practice phase, you need to keep engaged with the support teams for apps and Atlassian itself via your move ticket. And again, if you're engaging a partner, they would probably do that for you. Testing migrated data will include links between your products, so Confluence and Jira, Jira and Bitbucket, for example. App data should always be verified independently. And issues in the cloud migration might be able to be fixed through updates to the migration steps, but sometimes, a lot of times, there are manual steps required after the migration. These should be documented, and enough time to complete those steps should be allocated in the timing. So when discussing the testing cycle, I just mentioned user acceptance testing. So getting a subset of your end users to perform UAT can help uncover issues. The Jira administrator doesn't always know how the users use the system, so it's really important to take care to get every major user type or role that is using the cloud site. You have to take into account who has the bandwidth and the ability to provide clear and constructive feedback. They're not only reporting bugs, they might be reporting just changes that are not optimal and they want to change in the cloud. So saying that, I would definitely consider providing some cloud training and FAQs to your test users in advance so that they know what are expected differences between server and cloud versus a bug. So I think let's probably, so for a tip, what we did, and I have this on our case study, we actually set up a JSM customer portal that we used for testers to report issues. We did this in the cloud, obviously, and it was really helpful for them to get experience not only with the JSM customer portal, but it's a great way to integrate the feedback and triage bugs related to the migration. So again, support from Atlassian and application vendors is critical. If you're using a partner, they'll manage this for you. But if you are doing it yourself, then make sure you engage this support regularly. You have to be really careful with regard to time zones and business hours because the community is worldwide and now you're really experiencing it. And you have to engage those support teams, like I mentioned with the Tempo example, is because you don't have as much control over the cloud ecosystem as you do in server. You can't just make a correction to the data. So while this trade-off will ultimately be liberating, it can be a surprising adjustment for some teams during the migration journey. If you're using the JCMA, be aware that Atlassian is enhancing and improving the functionality regularly, like regularly. And with any product, this can mean bugs are introduced and then fixed. Because the JCMA will not run if it's out of date on the server, you're forced to perform the updates. So you're not always going to run the same version of the JCMA with subsequent tests. It's a little bit of a risk, but generally speaking, they're adding more features rather than introducing bugs. So it's still pretty good. Related to this, definitely check, if you haven't checked this, the JiraAtlassian.com migration project. It contains bugs, feature developments, and you can find any features that you're looking for and watch those tickets. So for example, there are a few bugs related to user migration that we're watching on behalf of our customers to make sure that once those are fixed, we change their plans. As well, you can watch maybe the Jira Service Management project type, which currently is not supported for the JCMA, but they are working on that feature. So you can keep up to date with those changes. So finally, there are a lot of moving parts. This is true for even small migrations. So leverage all the tools and support options available and ensure you have dedicated internal support for the migration. Even if you have a partner, you need someone kind of triaging and making sure that this runs smoothly on the customer side. So a few more things about this. So one of the things we found is carefully consider your site admin role specifically. So there are differences in the cloud in your organization, just the whole infrastructure for a cloud instance. The site admin role consumes a license for all products automatically, and you can't opt out. So if you have a single product with a very small number of seats, you easily use them up. This is kind of a gotcha that some of our clients started with just granting site admin in order to get users have their traditional kind of administrator role, didn't realize they were consuming licenses for every product. If you have premium or enterprise plans, you have access to a sandbox. It can be used for migrations or also future workflow changes and tests. And the sandbox is pretty cool. You can spin it up and copy your production data over to it with kind of a click of a button. So this is useful for retesting when performing phased migrations because you can copy your production data over and run a test as if it's against production. But just be aware there are limitations with regard to app data supported in a sandbox, so it's not exactly the same as your production environment. So project roles over user groups. Atlassian has always encouraged project roles for access because it's more flexible and the project administrator can manage it. With cloud, it's even more critical because of the level of privilege need to view and modify user groups. So this is a change we see a lot of customers make when they're migrating, is shifting from that group dependency in their permission schemes to project roles. And finally, make sure you freeze your production configuration between phases of the migration, so there's no conflict between server and cloud shared artifacts. When you migrate projects, if you're a heavy user of a project template, consider migrating all of those projects using the template at the same time. Okay, migrate and launch. This is the shortest phase. So after a few practices, when you're confident you're ready to move on, it's time to choose your production migration window. So there's a few factors that go into this scheduling. One of the most important, obviously, is to use the timings obtained by your test migration to determine how much time the migration will take. But there are other factors like downtime. Ideally, you would be scheduling the migration at night or on a weekend or a slow period, but it really depends on the availability of potentially your app vendor support, your partner support, Atlassian support. Factor in time for troubleshooting. Of course, user experience from testing, unexpected issues can come up, and just factor in some time for that. Let's see. I think that's about it for scheduling. Okay, so how will you know when you're ready to migrate? There are a few key outcomes to indicate when you're ready. You've installed and migrated all necessary apps. You've done at least one full test migration, sufficient user acceptance testing, and you have a completed migration plan and runbook updated with lessons learned from your practice migrations, issues raised during your UAT, and it's important to review that runbook with your CMM, or your partner will do that for you. And then, of course, you've set a date for the production migration and communicated that to all your stakeholders and to Atlassian. So after you've completed your migration and held a celebration, there are several activities to consider. So first of all, any issues that came up during the migration that were not showstoppers, go ahead and address those after the migration during the troubleshooting. A retrospective is especially useful for those using the phase migration strategy so that you can apply what you learned to the next phase. Once you've moved into go live, consider retiring your self-hosted server. If you're using a phased approach, of course, you won't do that until everything is completed. And as users switch to your new cloud site, they'll likely have feedback. So use that information to identify gaps in training, target skill development that may be needed. And it's also a good time maybe to review the Atlassian training courses if you're interested in any certifications. The new Enablement Academy, if you haven't seen it, has a ton of great content that is cloud focused. So finally, now that you're up and running, it's a great time to take a closer look at the cloud-only features that will be new to you, features that weren't offered as part of Server. So that might be new plugins and integrations, ITSM capabilities in JSM, and consider how and when to update your processes to take advantage of these new tools. Increasingly, we find non-IT teams using the Atlassian suite, so it might also be worth investigating whether like your HR department, legal, finance, or marketing teams can take advantage of these tools. So in the actual migration, you might encounter some of these issues that we have faced. This is a bit in the weeds, so if there are non-technical people here, I'm sorry, but it might give you a sense of some of the kinds of things to look out for. So with the JCMA, we encountered unexpected behavior, including things like project roles getting duplicated. That's very time consuming to manually fix because you have to go into each project and reassign people to the non-duplicated roles. It does give you what we found as a silver lining to that. It's an opportunity to apply security and permissions cleanup to your projects. And not all these issues occurred in the test migrations. So sometimes you can get something new in production. Project boards, this is kind of a detail. Shared project boards are not supported for JCMA, but we found that even if a filter is shared that's used by a project board, that is also not migrated. It comes up as an error in the JCMA log, but on the visual, if anyone has used the JCMA, it's got a very nice plug and play. Everything was good, 100% migrated, but there were errors in the log. So do check the log files for errors as well. Sometimes epic and issue links didn't migrate together. So we just fixed those after. It's a pretty simple fix, but it happened enough that we had documented it for our production migrations. So user training is really important. So even though most of your users will already have been using Jira and Confluence, if this is their first cloud experience, they can be frustrated with the change in the user experience. We found even just a few office hours sessions to showcase some of the really cool features of cloud can make the transition frictionless, and hardcore Jira server users quickly become cloud advocates. So when the migration is complete, you might want to invest some time integrating, as I mentioned, JSM, some of the new DevOps tools, which are really cool. The deployment hub is one that we really like, or using the really amazing automation that's available with all of the cloud plans to improve your processes and workflows. This can replace a lot of what was heavy workflow customization with automations that can be created by the project administrators. So finally, so this is a case study of a recent migration we did for the public sector. We had 10 agile teams. So it was about, I think it was a small instance, 150 users or 100 users using Jira Server only. They had an externally managed Active Directory for authentication, and they had 3 apps. So quite a simple migration, especially since they opted to not migrate any of their apps as they found that they weren't heavily used. 2 of them weren't used at all, and 1 of them didn't have an appropriate cloud equivalent, so they just decided to leave it behind. So we chose Optimize and Shift using the JCMA with 3 major phases. So we migrated sets of teams that used common projects together. So what went well? Oh, and the whole thing end to end took 4 months, and I'll tell you why it took so long. Because it was actually a fairly simple migration technically. So what went really well is we used, and we do this for all of our migrations, we use an Atlassian Cloud environment to actually manage the migration project. We use Jira software to set up epics and for each of the phases in order to track tasks for everyone involved. We kept all of our requirements, planning documents, and everything in Confluence Cloud. And we even set up a customer portal and JSM project in order to receive feedback and bug reports from the users and testers. And even in post-migration, we use that same strategy to assemble feedback. So this worked really well, not just from a project management perspective, because of course, these tools are great to manage projects, but it also gave our client users a lot of familiarity with the cloud features through us setting up the project. And, you know, because as a partner managed project, we set it all up and we show them all of the different best practice ways in the cloud and new things you can do. So by the time we completed the project, I would say our Atlassian advocates that were, you know, on the client side, the Jira administrators, the project managers, they got a really good experience with the cloud. Because we had a phased approach, we repeated the migrations multiple times. Using a retrospective each time did refine our processes. So by the time our migration was completed, we had a very good run book for all of the pre-migration and the post-migration manual steps. What we could improve was looking at the pre-migration data checklist a little earlier. So in fact, we actually knew very early on we had some bad data. And one of the very common areas that server instances have bad data is with users. So user accounts on the server use your usernames, and the email address is optional. And in the cloud, email address must be unique, and there is no username for login purposes. So we had some users with null or duplicate email addresses. So we knew that, but we didn't consider how long it would take to fix them. And that's because the group we were working with did not have managed the upstream Active Directory. So it's not that we didn't know how to fix it. We just had to work through probably 3 or 4 weeks of hurdles organizationally to get those things fixed. So the only other thing I would have done differently is plan the phases closer together. This is kind of to mitigate the risk of the JCMA making big changes during the window of the phases. And also, we moved 3 teams and maybe 8 or 9 projects with each phase, but it was difficult to freeze the configuration on server and cloud during the time frame. So we kind of did that because of availability of the teams, and we didn't want to disrupt some teams that were working on a high important deadline, but we probably would have scheduled the entire migration just so we could have done it closer together. So that is it. Sorry, that was very long. Let me just go back.
Well,
Right.
thank you, Karen. Thank you, Joanne. A lot of useful information there. Okay, I've opened up the Q&A session. If you have questions, you could also use the general channel there. If you want to ask something in rather than type it up, just flag me. I can grant you audio permissions if you'd prefer.
Quiet group.
Yes, yes. Just while we're waiting there, you were mentioning the different sort of options that are available, the premium and the enterprise and the standard. Are you able to mix and match those, or are you, for an instance, are you looking at basically everybody having a special tier or whatnot?
I think for a single instance, you do have, I don't think you can mix and match a standard premium and a cloud enterprise. Having said that, or am I wrong, Karen?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes,
oh my gosh, you know better than me. Okay.
Yeah, so you can have Confluent Standard. A lot of people opt for Confluent Standard, but Jira Premium.
Oh, sorry.
Jira Software Premium.
Products,
but
yes.
Enterprise, with Enterprise, you're Enterprise.
Okay.
Yes.
So you
Enterprise, you get like unlimited users, and so
Gotcha.
yeah.
Alrighty. All right. We do have a question from Erica Larson there. Atlassian tools are used throughout our company. Any tips for end user training?
Yeah, like I said, we found we've done a variety of training options. So through formal Atlassian training. So we're a training provider, and there are a number of them out there, or you can get training directly from Atlassian. But what we found really, really useful for experienced Jira Server users, again, is a series of office hours where you have a partner or a very experienced cloud user who's familiar with your environment and how you use Jira, and then they walk through the new features, like a 20-minute, 30-minute walkthrough of the navigation changes, and then describe a bunch of the new features. There's a lot of stuff that even experienced cloud users don't know about, so I would definitely recommend engaging a very experienced cloud user or training partner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, David Cowley. Karen, have you had any groups that must meet the tough BC privacy legislation that has already moved to cloud? If so, how are they satisfying the legislation?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And, they satisfy it through either evaluating the data that's actually in their server, because a lot of people really don't, they think there's personal identifying data, but they don't really know what is that personal identifying data. And we also find that some organizations are making a shift to get away from that blanket, even the data residency, to say, you know, there are exceptions for certain types of content. But they have been doing PNs draws for that.
Yeah, and we're also seeing that across, David, across the country as well. You know, where governments are buying into cloud, and like Karen said, it really depends on the type of data that you're putting into Jira or into the Atlassian products. Once you dig a little deeper, sometimes that data doesn't contain any personal information. So like Karen said, it's pretty, when you do that assessment and you figure out like, okay, what kind of data do we have? And if we do migrate, then what is that going to look like, right? And also just going through our trust pages and all of our security information that we have on our website. Sometimes that's enough to answer some of the questions around security and compliance. So I would encourage you to go and have a look at that page. David, it's Atlassian.com, I believe, /trust. So you can find all kinds of good information there around security. Yeah.
Okay.
So from Nadine, the cost impact, are you talking about the cost impact of the licenses or the service of the migration? The licenses is a fairly straightforward one once you've decided on your platforms and your products. You know, you engage a partner or get a quote through self-service. It is complicated to navigate that journey though. So a partner can be really useful from the licensing perspective because it's not quite as simple of a one-to-one path. As far as the migration goes, you know, it really depends how much service you want. Do you want someone to manage your entire migration? And we are talking about potentially, you know, like I said, it could be a 12-month migration with it's an actual project that's managed. So it can be, you know, depending on how much service you want, it's not inexpensive, but it's a big effort, you know, and it's a critical system. People have been used to managing Jira off kind of this, I want to say not the side of their desk, but through their local IT systems. And as you do this migration, you realize this is a lot more complicated. And if you engage someone that does it kind of regularly, you probably will get it done faster. You'll pay money for an external resource, but you won't be paying your internal resource to learn how to do a migration. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just to add to that, like some customers, like you said, Karen, you know, think that, oh, it shouldn't be that tough. You know, we can just do it on our own and we've got internal resources. And then once they understand the scope of the project and it looks to be bigger than they originally thought it would be, you know, they call upon the services of a solution partner. So like Karen said, you know, our solution partners are doing these migrations regularly. They have, you know, they see the same kind of issues come up all the time, and they probably know a little bit more about, you know, how to avoid certain things or how to get around certain issues. So I highly encourage you to enlist the partner community for a migration, no matter how small. And there should be one in your local area. If you have any questions, there is a partner directory on our website as well. And a lot of our partners are doing remote work as well. So they don't necessarily have to be on site, but can accommodate customers across the country. So yeah.
All right. Nadine had a quick
the
follow-up.
work log question, I don't know the answer to. Oh, sure. So the license cost. So the total cost of ownership, there's some great resources out there for total cost of ownership, because it's not just the license cost, of course. So there's some really good resources online, and I think there's a new calculator that's out from Atlassian on the Atlassian site. So if you search for cloud migration or cloud calculators, I'll get the link for Brendan.
Yeah, sure. Nadine mentions script runner, which is obviously, that can be a bit of a beast. Do partners sort of help with any of the customization or whatnot, or with regards to script runner?
That's a huge part of what we do. So yeah. Script runner and all of the plugins.
Oh, sorry, Karen.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the first things that a partner does is do an app assessment. And so you know, some of the apps like you might not even be using. So like Nadine, you say, I think it was Nadine, you mentioned that like the cost of the apps are more expensive on the cloud side, but like, you know, we actually, if you have more than a certain number of apps, we actually have the partner look at like, which apps are you actually using? Which ones can you know, which ones are you not using, and which ones you don't need for the cloud, right? So that's part of the whole migration process. So, yeah,
Okay.
very helpful.
All right. Just a minute or
So
so
I don't
left.
know the answer to the work log question,
Yeah.
so I can try and find that. As far as where most of our clients is, a lot of clients really want the estimate and the timeline before any assessment is done. And that's where we struggle the most is you need to do some level of assessment, and we can help with that. So what we find is a lot of people are doing the first two phases. So they're doing the assess and plan early, and then they're doing the migration maybe scheduled for the next quarter or something like that. So we find a lot of people are doing that. We are mostly focused, my company is mostly focused on server to cloud, but in the assessment phase, we might determine if data center is a better approach. So the early phase should be done regardless. If you have to move somewhere, and the assess phase will determine if cloud is a no-go for you for some reason.
Okay. All right. I think we've answered everything there. If you have any other questions, please just reach out to the local community. We'll try and get answers for you as best we can. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us today. Greatly appreciate Karen and Joanne joining us and helping because this is, I know, an exciting time for anybody who's but also a nerve-wracking time for anybody who's got a server instance, or in my case I have two server instances that I have to merge into one. So you know, it's an exciting time for anybody that's looking to move towards the future in cloud there. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Karen. Bye.
Bye.